You're listening to the Millionacres Podcast. Our mission at Millionacres is to educate and empower investors to make great decisions and achieve real estate investing success. We provide regular content and perspective for everyone, from those just starting out to seasoned pros with decades of experience. At Millionacres, we work every day to help you demystify real estate investing and build real wealth.
Hello, I'm Deidre Woolard, an editor at Millionacres, and thank you so much for tuning into the Millionacres Podcast. I am excited to be here with Moneeka Sawyer of the Blissful Investor. I had the honor of appearing on her podcast last year, and I got to learn a little bit more about her approach to investing. I just love her attitude and the idea of blissful investing and her message of empowerment for women through real estate, which is something I too am very passionate about. She's the creator of the Blissful Real Estate Investor Formula, and we'll talk about that during the show. So welcome. Hi.
Hey there, Deidre. So nice to see you again. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, I just love your energy and your positive outlook. I think it's kind of unique in real estate where a lot of people kind of are a little more serious. So how do you keep that positive outlook?
It's been a lifelong journey for me. My attitude about this is I'd rather be happy than anything else in the world. So in those moments where because we all have bad days and bad moments, right? I learned something from Hal Elrod. He said, when you have something bad that happens to you, you've got a choice. You can choose to wallow in that, or you can say, give yourself some time to be upset, like to honor your feelings, right? He gives himself 5 minutes. It never works for me at 5 minutes, but you give yourself a deadline and then you say, can't change it. And then you move on, right? So there's some anchors that we create for ourselves that then lift us up. And you know what? It's great to honor our feelings. We need to. They're messages for what's happening in our lives and what might need to change. But we don't want to live there. I'd much rather live in this space of being happy. And so that's kind of some of the things that I do to make sure that I keep myself sort of at the level of joy that I want to live my life at.
I love that. And I think that makes sense even just for like real estate, because like if you've got a rental property and, your water heater explodes and there's drama, you have to kind of go, okay, that happened. Now let's move forward.
What's next? Right. Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that I think about, I thought a lot about financial education. And one of the things I think women face as they get started as investors is that we didn't all receive those great financial lessons growing up. And that's both men and women, anyone. I think there's financial messaging that we receive. What did you receive about investing and real estate in particular?
So it's really, really interesting. My parents actually came to this country as immigrants, brand newlyweds with an arranged marriage. So they barely knew each other and they had $200 in their pocket. And they were determined, realized that the golden ticket to wealth in the United States was to buy real estate. So my mom's a doctor, my dad's an engineer, but they saved all of their money to start investing in real estate. So through my entire life, I got the messaging to invest, that investing is the way to wealth. So that was really, really good. On the other side of that, I saw my dad with all the drama and trauma of real estate investing, right? Like what you were saying, like a water heater blows up, or he'd get a call because plumbing went bad at 2 o'clock in the morning somewhere, or whatever. Mortgages weren't getting paid because rent didn't get paid. So I saw all of that too. So another lesson that I got was is really, really hard work and is really stressful. And so as I grew up, I made a decision as a very young woman that no, thank you, money was not worth all of that stress, right? So I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to be in real estate. But then when I graduated from college, it was a recession. I could barely find a job. And now this whole concept of money and what it really means, it means survival, became a very stressful issue in my life. And so one evening I was sitting with my dad and he said something to me across the dinner table that just completely changed my life. I had been telling him how stressed out I was and how was I going to survive and money was so hard and what was I going to do. And he said to me, Moneeka, everybody has stress. Everybody has fear, right? Because I had fear about real estate, and everybody has money problems. Do you want poor people money problems, or do you want rich people money problems?
Mm.
And the very first thing I thought was, rich people have money problems? Wait, right? But I really got the message in that moment, right? That this was an important thing to put my focus on so that I could create freedom for myself. And so that's kind of how my path started with real estate. And that's the messaging that I got my whole life.
That is fantastic. So you went to business school, though, right? At Haas at UC Berkeley, which is one of the best business schools in the country. What didn't you learn about real estate and investing there?
I didn't learn anything about real estate and investing there. That was an interesting thing. Business school teaches you how to be in a corporate job, right? And I learned a lot of great skills. I learned a lot about finance and accounting and marketing and all of those things. But I didn't learn anything about investing. And when I talk to business owners, I talk to business owners all the time. One of the things that I remind them is that running a business, so if you're working in corporate, it's a different thing. But if you're running a business, you're responsible for everything. It's really, really important that you create the safety of a backup plan in case something happens. Like we just had a pandemic. Who would have predicted that? And how many businesses have suffered because of that, right? Life happens. So you run your business, but you create a backup plan. And that backup plan is your investments. You don't want to be physically involved in that. That's not something you should be involved in. But you should have your money working for you so that it's there for you if you need it. And this is not something that was taught at Haas. Now, maybe it was in classes that I didn't take, but it's not something I heard about. And it's certainly not a class that I ever took or was offered.
Well, and I think you just said something really interesting, which is the idea of wanting to have your money work for you. And I think a lot of people get worried about real estate investing because they think it's a second job and they're already, full up on their first job, but they don't necessarily want that second job. So how do you convince people that real estate can be not that second job of actually having to, be constantly working at it?
Yes. So my whole philosophy is about blissful investing. And so let me first give you a few definitions about what this looks like, and then this definitely, I promise, will lead to what your question is. So bliss is a deep sense of joy, of joy and contentment, and the feeling that you can handle anything that comes your way. So it's really about emotional mastery and resilience. Now, what does this have to do with real estate? Well, Warren Buffett says if you can't control your emotions, you can't control your money. So, if this is really about emotional mastery, you can see that this also helps us in how we invest, right? But the other piece about bliss is creating joy in your own life. And how do we create joy for ourselves? We first have to start with, who am I? What is it about me that would be a good investor? What do I love to do? What are my resources? And I'm talking about time per day, time per week, but also time frame to reach your goals, right? What are your financial resources? What are your people resources? How risk averse are you? How much time do you want to spend like learning things, right? So there's all of these things. So to become a blissful investor, you have to look at all of those things and then understand that every strategy out there in real estate is not going to be for you. If you're in corporate and you have a 60-hour-a-week job, you don't want to be a flipper, because a flipper spends another 40 hours a week handling their project. It might only be for 3 to 6 months, but still, that's another job, right? So if you're in corporate, you might want to do something significantly more passive. So you might have rental properties that are handled by a management company. I love what you talk about, Deidre, is with REITs, right? There's syndication. There's so many, I always say, there's a million ways to make $1 million in real estate. Pick a strategy that's aligned with you, what you're looking for in your goals, but also what you want to be doing. For me, I spend 5 to 10 hours a month on my business. I know other real estate investors, they would go crazy getting bored doing that. They love real estate so much. So it really is about who you are and how much time you want to spend. There's so many opportunities in this industry.
I like that, because there's an idea of, you said something that's kind of interesting, is this idea of how much do you like real estate versus how much money do you want to get from it? You're absolutely right. Some people want to be flippers. That's fun. It's a hobby. Some people love learning how to do new stuff and, fix things. And other people, I'm one of them, just don't want to do that. So I think that's a really good point. So, what do you teach in blissful real estate investing?
So, in my course, the one that you mentioned, I really talk about sort of the secret sauce of how I have created this business that I only work 5 to 10 hours a month at. I do executive rentals. And so, for me, the way that here's like a teaser on the secret sauce. um, I teach to work it backwards, right? So you find out what works for you. For me, um, I really wanted to do something that was very hands off. And then you decide who is it that you want to be doing business with. We talked about some different things like with REITs, you're not doing business with anybody, right? You're just investing on the stock market. But if you have rental properties that are managed by a management company, now your business partner is a manager of the man that manages your properties, right? For me, I wanted to self-manage my properties. And so who did I want to do business with? Well, that means who are going to be my tenants, because your tenants are the single most important factor in whether your business will be blissful or not. Whether they call you to change a light bulb, whether they pay their rent, all of those things are going to determine how happy you are and how much time you spend in your business. So I start with the tenant first, and then I build my business around that. And so the blissful real estate investor formula talks about how I do that and all of those steps along the way to go from beginning the business to creating and scaling a business.
So, you said executive rentals. What exactly is that?
Yeah, it's just rich people houses. so so it's people that are like I've mostly executives in, I've had executives, VPs and directors from Facebook, Pinterest, Google, all the big companies in the Silicon Valley. Sony actually brought some people in from Japan. So I have usually their president, director, or CEO level people that live in these houses. So I've created living spaces that they really, really enjoy.
Interesting. So, luxury properties. So, a lot of people find investing in luxury properties to be riskier. Obviously, a more expensive house, you're taking on more debt, things like that. Was that ever a concern for you when you were getting started?
Absolutely. And I did not start that way either. I grew up to that. I sort of, as you go along, and this is another thing to really remember, anybody who's listening, is that your business will evolve. So the way you think you know a lot, right? And you start your business and then it evolves to something that you love even more. So I started with people that were engineers. I live in the Silicon Valley. So I wanted to go with professionals. So I started with engineers. The houses were lower level, less expensive. And over time, I was able to grow more to these executive homes. Now, yes, the risk is I own 6 properties. If a door goes empty, I'm now losing $5,000 of rent a month and my mortgage is high, right? But there is a flip side to every single thing. In an executive home, if you have an executive in there, they entertain other executives. And then when they get transferred to another position, they have a lot of executive friends that know about this house. So pretty much, I always have the places rented within a month of the other person even leaving. So I don't have vacancies. I have to do cleanup. So I'll have a vacancy for a week, but I don't have vacancies. So different markets will take care of you as a landlord in different ways. I don't like having a lot of doors because I don't like having to deal with this all the time. So I've chosen I'll have high cash flow, high value properties, but I'll only have a few of them. And I've structured it in a way that I don't lose money too much during a turnover. Like a week, yeah. I mean, still that's $1,000, right? But but rents also go up, right? So it all kind of, you choose. Every single way that you do business is going to have its positives and its negatives. These are the positives and negatives that I decided I could live with and would give me
Hmm.
bliss.
I love what you said. Different markets, treat investors in different ways, because I think that's an important factor for anyone considering real estate. Now, I know also that you have spoken before about the 2008, 2009 financial crisis and what that was like for you. You had a gorgeous home, and all of a sudden, it was losing value. What lessons did that teach you?
Really, I think the biggest lesson was to keep my head. So there are a couple of, actually, there's some really big ones. First of all, don't over leverage. Most of the people that lost their homes because they were financed at 100%, some even higher. And so they couldn't afford to continue to make the payments as renters left or as things went wrong, they got foreclosed on, right? So the very first thing is don't over leverage. And the reality is that you don't actually lose money until you sell a property. So even if you're over leveraged, you can recover as long as you can continue to hold the house, right? And this is true for everything. No matter what you own, if you can continue to hold it, then you don't lose money, because in most cases, not all cases around the United States, but in most, the property's eventually recovered. That's kind of the nature of real estate. But you need to be able to continue to rent those places out. So developing the skill to be able to handle rents. Much of rents in my area, at least, and in a lot of areas, rents went up. So actually I was more able to cover the mortgage. But the big thing was not to freak out and sell because I was underwater. All of my properties lost about 50% of their value. I was millions of dollars underwater. But so I could have done what a lot of people did, was just freak out, right? Instead, I held them. I kept them rented. I raised rents, right? A little bit more because I needed to cover those mortgages. And we just kind of rode the storm. It was painful. It was scary. I needed to stop looking at Zillow every day to see the value of my houses. Like, there's things that you can do to cause yourself a huge amount of stress, right? I stopped doing those things and just decided that I was going to trust that I know the real estate market and it will recover. And it did. It turns out that now I'm millions of dollars ahead of where I was, but I had to kind of keep my sanity around it all and not sell. Don't sell. So don't over leverage. Don't oversell. Don't sell when you're down. Hold it if you can. And then also, like, keep your head.
Yeah, that's the same thing with stocks too. Every time we're in a bad stock market, you see so many people panic, and I just want to tell people, just like, hold on. It's going to be okay. The market goes up and down. This is the way life works. If you hold on through the tough stuff, you're going to be so much better off over time. But people, it's emotional. And I think that's part of real estate investing, stock investing, anything. Money is tied to emotion. Do you feel like that's part of it too?
Absolutely. And that's why I was saying that Bliss is really about emotional mastery, and emotional resilience. Like, if you have an emotional crash, you have to have the tools to bring yourself back up to this balanced, grounded place. Because you don't want, when it comes to money, you don't want to be making your decisions emotionally. We have a right to our emotions, but your financial life will not benefit from you making financial decisions from emotions. So you want to be able to run your business from this place of emotional balance, of what I call bliss, right? Because here's the other thing. Why bliss? Why not just emotional mastery? If you are able to see the world from a positive perspective, you're less likely to freak out. How did this pay off for me in the 2008 thing when I was 50% down on all my properties? Because I had the belief in my mind that things were going to get better. I had a choice, right? I could have said, oh my gosh, the world is falling apart. What if nothing gets better? I've seen, like in 2001, what happened, and all these people lost all this money. I could have focused on that. But instead, I focused on, look at what the market has done over time. I know I'm right. I just need to give myself time to be right, right? Reasons to be positive, reasons to have joy, reasons to look the other way from the negative things that are happening. Now, certainly, don't be stupid and naive. I hope that I wasn't that. But but our positive outlook gives us the wherewithal, the grit to keep moving
Mm.
forward.
Well, let's talk about something that's sort of related because I was talking to one of our analysts and we are talking a little bit about the role of intuition. So I feel like intuition, it's connected to emotion in some ways, but yet it's also different. And intuition is a very valuable tool, I believe, in all kinds of investing that we don't often listen to. Is intuition something that you think about with investing?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for talking about that because that's also a feminine superpower. Guys, if you're listening, please forgive me. I'm not saying that you can't do this, but it really is a feminine superpower. So this is something that we talk about a lot. So I believe that we have three brains. We have our intellectual brain. The numbers have to work in real estate or you don't have a business, right? You go broke. The emotions have to work. You have to feel good about your business and you have to emotionally be good in a good place to make good business decisions. So our emotions really affect our business too. And then we have our gut. Now, what often happens, our gut is what I'm calling our intuition. When we think about it, we think our gut's in our belly, but our intuition is really kind of all over, right? But that's just kind of how I call it. But this gut or this intuition will often tell us things we can't see, hear, prove, but they give us an idea that something either is awesome or is not working. And I think, unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people, they're like, the numbers really work and this feels really good. I like this area. And if they have the gut feeling that's like, there's something not quite right, they bulldoze over that in favor of making money or making a decision, and they don't take the time to pay attention. And usually that gut feeling that you bulldozed over could have made your business significantly better in some way. So, for instance, let's say you walk into a home. For me, I walk into executives' homes. I walk into a home in a neighborhood I love. The numbers really work. I love the house. I already have a tenant. I'm really excited. I've looked at 30 houses. This is the one. But then when I'm sitting and writing an offer, I'm like, I don't know. This just doesn't feel right. So I could say, well, Moneeka, you're just in fear because it's another expensive house and you weren't, whatever. Or I could say, why does this not feel right? And I will say that for me, there have been several times where this doesn't feel right turned out to be the neighbor next door had a meth lab. And that eventually the neighborhood went way down for a little while because this hadn't been disclosed and now this was bringing down the property values, right? So I had walked out of a property that I could have had so much trouble with, right? Nobody had disclosed that. There was no way for me to see that in the middle of the day when I was looking at a house, Anyway, so that's one of those. There's another one where I had a feeling that with tenants, like someone was moving in, they checked out, everything was awesome. And I decided against them for somebody else who couldn't pay as much. And it turned out that they had a bunch of foster animals that they kept in their house, but they weren't telling me that they had animals because they didn't own them. They were fosters. So it was supposed to be short term. But I had kind of a weird feeling like, okay, well, I'm not sure why this doesn't make sense to me, whatever. So my intuition has helped me a lot in my business. And the thing is, it's not always going to be obvious how it helped you. But the more you tune into listening to it, we're really good at looking at the numbers and listening to our brain. We're getting better at listening to our hearts and our emotions and what those are telling us. But so few people are good yet at paying attention to their intuition. And it takes practice. So just pay attention to it. Take a look at it. Slow down enough to bring that into your business process.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that. All right, let's take a quick break here.
Like what you're hearing? Get more real estate investing news and advice from Millionacres on Instagram at Millionacres and on Twitter at Millionacres_co.
During our break today, we are excited to have Millionacres lead investment analyst Matt Argersinger here to speak briefly about one of our newest services, Real Estate Winners. Thank you for joining us, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
So what is Real Estate Winners and who is it for?
Well, I like to think of Real Estate Winners as our answer to Stock Advisor in the real estate market. It is a service that provides recommendations on publicly traded real estate investment trusts and real estate companies. So it's a pretty big universe out there. There's over 200 REITs to choose from and probably dozens, if not hundreds, of real estate companies are in our universe. And we provide regular investment recommendations as well as commentary on the market, educational material. And it's really designed to get anyone who's interested in investing and learning about real estate started.
So is it geared toward new investors or is it more for seasoned pros?
I think real estate winners can serve both. I think if you're a new investor, maybe you're just getting started with stocks and you want to learn more about how to add real estate to your portfolio, great place to start. If you're a seasoned investor and just thinking, okay, how can I diversify my portfolio, maybe reduce the volatility in my portfolio, maybe add some income to my portfolio, then I think Real Estate Winners is a great solution for that cohort as well.
Fantastic. What are the benefits of being a member of Real Estate Winners?
Number one benefit is day one when you join, you get our top 10 investment ideas at the moment. So really right from the beginning, you know what our 10 best ideas in the publicly traded real estate market are. And then going forward on a monthly basis, you'll get a new recommendation, sometimes more than one new recommendation, as well as regular content that we're coming out. We're covering our past recommendations, providing updates, and talking about the real estate market. So it's really the full package.
Perfect. So what do you need to get started?
Really all you need is a discount brokerage account. So if you're used to buying stocks, and you probably already have that. If you haven't bought stocks in the past, of course, just open a discount brokerage account. These days, you don't even have to pay commissions. It's fantastic. So it really couldn't be easier to get started investing with Real Estate Winners.
Sounds fantastic. So how can people sign up?
Sure. They can head over to real.fool.com. That's real.fool.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt.
I'm back with Moneeka Sawyer of Blissful Investor, and we're talking about happiness and real estate investing and intuition and all sorts of wonderful other things. So let's talk a little bit about automating and delegating. I know it's something you've talked about with other people on your podcast. You mentioned just now you'd like to manage the properties yourself, but what tasks do you delegate?
I delegate a lot of my administrative tasks. Depending on the business that you run, there are things that are in your genius zone that you're best at doing, right? So for me, the thing that I'm best at doing is acquisition and finding really, really good tenants and training them. But all the other things around that, I'm not very good at. So dealing with technology to list properties, right? All the loan stuff. I completely delegated that to my husband. He handles all the paperwork. He and I together go through the finances when we're looking at whether our property works, because that's his genius zone. But mostly for me, it's all the administrative stuff, all of those little things that we should be doing, dealing with Facebook and doing all the responses to everybody that's interested when I've got a house available, or getting all the stuff. I just had a vacancy during the pandemic, and so there was all these new signs and rules, so someone had to read all those rules and let me know what I could and couldn't do, right? So all of that stuff gets handled by somebody else, but the actual acquisition, the looking at the properties, and filling those properties, I do.
Genius zone. That is a great phrase. And I think something that people need to think about is like, what is your genius zone? What is the part that you do really well and the part that you like? And the other stuff, find someone else that's their genius zone.
Exactly. And there's an obvious one on this one too. I love designing and looking at colors and creating beautiful spaces. But I don't love painting and being a handyman and changing the toilet, right? So all of that is delegated. I just handle the piece that I love, as you say, right?
Wonderful. So you mentioned you love the acquisition process. What are you thinking about this crazy market? How are you reacting to it? How long do you think it's going to last?
That's such a good question, and goodness knows I have no idea, Deidre. So here is my take on this. There's a lot of predictions of what's going to happen, and someone will be right, and we just don't know who. So I go with my historical beliefs and data about the the real estate market. Over time, the real estate market will rise. If I choose to buy now, we could have a dip. It could continue to go up. I could be right or could be wrong, but I need to give myself the time to be right, which means anything that I do right now has to be a long-term play so I can watch the market play out. because it is very, very unpredictable. We have no idea. Well, I feel like I have no real idea on that. And it's not something I can control anyways. What I can control is where I invest and how much time I give myself to be right.
Exactly. I like that idea of knowing what you can control and what you can't control. Inventory right now is something that nobody can control. So I think that's something that is really just impacting the way that investors feel. There's so much pressure to try to find a property, and right now there's nothing out there. So sometimes when you don't know, the best thing to do is to wait. So I think a lot of people are doing that as well. Obviously, you invest with your husband. I feel like we're kind of in a shift on how men and women negotiate money in relationships. We see a lot of couples that are investors. We're also seeing more women be the primary breadwinner. What are you seeing, and how do you think those dynamics impact real estate investing?
Yeah. So definitely. So I'm gonna say this word a little bit in quote marks, but in sort of the old paradigm of investing and running the household, we kind of accepted that men were better with money and women were taking better at taking care of the relationships in the household. It doesn't mean that we didn't split the more recently, right? Split our labor like what we did, but we kind of figured out who we thought we knew whose genius zone was whose, right? And I think what we're discovering is that women tend to be really, really good with money. Also, we just don't have traditionally the cultural background or the cultural training to talk about it and think about it. And so now what we're seeing with the younger women, and I'm delighted about this, is that women are sort of like, you know what? I want control of my own life. I'm actually going to be doing a talk soon about called "The Freedom of Choice is the New Wealth," because we want choice. We don't want to get married because we're desperate for someone to take care of us. We don't want someone else controlling our life and our world and being at the mercy of someone else's financial decisions. So I think that we're shifting to where we're educating ourselves better. I run a podcast called Real Estate Investing for Women, and it's phenomenally popular because women want to do this, and they're discovering that they can. So in our households with the men, I think there's a little bit of confusion also because they've been brought up a certain way. Women are kind of standing up and saying, wait a minute, let's do this differently. So sometimes there's confusion. What it requires is a lot of, like you say, really good conversation, a lot of understanding, and a building of trust on both sides so that balance can happen. In my home, I will admit I am not crazy about the numbers. I did accounting and finance and all the number stuff, calculus, trig, everything. I'm good at math, but it's not my favorite thing to do. So when it comes to the numbers, my husband is heavily involved because he enjoys it. He's a software programmer. I much prefer acquisition and looking at pretty houses, right? So, but women are really, really good at a lot of stuff in real estate. And one of those things is, as you just said, Deidre, really paying attention to our intuition. Because if we pay attention to our intuition, our businesses can expand in ways that we can't fathom. And we have access to that better than the men do. So I think as in real estate, us women are amazing. And I think we're discovering that. And I really want to encourage women to step forward even more in this way to build their own wealth. It gives them choice. It brings wealth to their family. It leaves a legacy for their children. It's good all the way around.
Some people say that women are more risk averse than men. I think that is becoming less of a factor. I know plenty of badass women investors who are very risk tolerant. What do you think about that?
I think it's ironic, and I think I have a skewed view on this because I do my callers that call me and have consultations with me from my show are all women. And frequently I'll get the question, Moneeka, I'm really interested in moving forward, but I can't convince my husband. He thinks it's too risky. So I think it's perspective, right? From my perspective, I'm hearing about all these kind of risk averse guys that we're having to sort of pull in and say, hold on, take a look at the numbers, take a look at historical data on real estate. So I'm seeing a lot more of the men that I'm having to say, it's okay. So, but I do think that sort of historically, women were more focused on, let's keep everything safe, right? So that's probably still there, but I do definitely think it's changing. And like I said, I see an awful lot of men that are very, very risk averse. And a lot of the men, it's interesting because they've heard more about the stock market. So they like the idea of liquidity and control. And women feel that they control their money better by having a tangible asset, which is real estate, right? So it's also it's an interesting perspective on how do we see risk, right?
I like that. That's very interesting because I think that's one of the things that if you are a couple and you want to invest together, you kind of have to both be on board with it. One of the things that on our team we have, I'm doing a video series on a couple that's doing a house hack, and they had to come to real estate investing together because they're obviously going to buy the house and rent it out. So it's really a conversation that if you are in a relationship, you have to have that conversation with your partner and make sure that they're on board with you.
Yeah. Deidre, I think there's also a really important point to make here, and I'm glad that you brought that up, is that we need to be conscious of our partner's feelings around this. If you just go and say, I'm going to do it with or without them, it becomes a lot harder because down the line, running any business without the support of your spouse is going to be hard. That's true on both sides. Your husband needs to get you on board and you need to get him on board. There are a lot of couples that don't do that. And the businesses suffer and their marriages suffer and their bliss suffers. So if you want to have a business that's really successful, that's sustainable, and that supports the joy in your life and your relationship, you do really need to at least get buy-in. They don't necessarily have to be in business with you, but you should at least get buy-in on what each other is doing.
Absolutely. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about mentorship and coaching. I know it's something that you've talked about before. Just about every successful investor that I talk to tells me about their great mentor or their great coach. Who are some of those people that have been there for you?
So I've had a lot. I'm heavily believe in mentors and coaches. Every successful person, all the way up to the most powerful people in the entire world, have coaches. And your coaches will rise as you rise. Each time you get to a next level, you will need another next level of coach. So sometimes we outgrow our coaches, and that's okay. So mentorship is huge. I have to say that my biggest mentor is my dad and mom. So my mom is my mentor on keeping my attitude and sort of living this joyful life that I live. And my dad is my business mentor. He's the one that talks about, do you want poor people problems or rich people problems? What sacrifices are you willing to make? Because there always will be sacrifices. Like dad has taught me sort of all of my business principles. And then whenever I come to him with a problem around real estate, he's been in the business for 50 years. He doesn't necessarily run his business the same way that I do, but he has an awful lot of knowledge and he has an awful lot of friends that have knowledge. And so together, we're able to put together things that really benefit me. Now, I have had many paid mentors that I love, but I can't say that there's any one in particular that stands out. I think each of those mentors brings something to the table, but there's not someone that sort of changed my life. I think the person that continually changes my life is my dad.
I love that. So you mentioned something interesting right there, which is the idea of outgrowing your coaches. And I think that's an important one for some investors to kind of zero in on, because I feel like a lot of people know how to buy their first property or their second property, but there's a little bit of a gap between going from being a one or two property investor to having a larger portfolio like you do. So how did you get from that sort of like one or two level up to where you are now where you have more properties?
I had conversations with people. So in meetups, or I would get it. Right now, I'm in construction, completely new avenue for me. And I got a business partner that had done two projects before me. So I'm learning a lot. I brought money, I brought enthusiasm, I brought boots on the ground capability, but he brought knowledge, right? And so a lot of it is just networking. It's just having the conversations. It's asking enough people about my problem to find answers that either I get consistently or that sound right with what my business is needing. And this is the thing, that as you grow, you start to also grow into understanding, oh, this feels like really, really good advice. Now, all advice is not good, right? But here's one thing also that I really, really pay attention to is I only take advice from people who are where I want to be. So when I'm trying to buy my first rental property, it's okay to take advice from someone who only has 2 or 3 rental properties. But if I want to have 50 rental properties, I need to start having conversations with people that have 50 rental properties, right? If I want to be wealthy, I want to talk to somebody who's wealthy. If I want to invest in the stock market, I want to talk to somebody who has invested in the stock market successfully for years and years and years. And here's another thing. They have to go through cycles. They have to know what it's like to go through the bad times. Like, don't talk to somebody in real estate who just entered in 2010. Like, seriously, they have not gone through some serious cycles. I've been through 2 cycles, 2 big ones, 2001 and 2008. When you find a mentor, make sure they know what it's like when things go really, really bad, because that's when you're going to need them most, right? So those are the sorts of things that I look for in a mentor.
Awesome. Okay. You mentioned construction. Are you doing a new spec house or what are you doing there?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This is so interesting. Lumber prices have gone up so much. People, construction, this is crazy.
Oh, yes.
We started this project 10 years ago. We bought a piece of property, and the city has been really hard to get through. There's all sorts of stuff. Anyways, it took us 9 years just to get our permits. So we started building 4 months ago during the pandemic, just before all the lumber prices went up. So, but we're building a multi-use property. So we are building it's condominiums on the top, and then commercial down below, commercial and parking down below. And here are some of the things that I've learned even early on. First of all, it is so much fun. Women, you want to talk about feeling like you're birthing something. I go there and I feel like this is my baby, and every week I get to see it grow into a completely new entity. It's absolutely beautiful. This is the most delightful experience of my life. But I am watching my margins go down because of costs and supply chain stuff. So one of the things that I do with construction or with any new project is I make sure that I have several options as my exit strategy. When we bought this property 10 years ago, the exit strategy was sell, make a ton of money, and move on to the next project. We don't know. Maybe that will still happen, and yay, that would be awesome. But we actually don't know, because of the market, how things are going to look on the back end of this. So there's a couple of things we can do. We could still sell it and take a lesser margin. We could rent it out, or we could move into it and make it a owner occupied property and make income on other rentals in the property, right? So we've created a situation where no matter what happens on the back end of this, we've got an exit strategy that will benefit us and not stress us out, and we can move on to the next project. So that's kind of where we're at with this thing. I will say it's a little bit crazy. I'm loving it. Loving it. And I also understand there's some risk here that I wasn't anticipating, right?
Awesome. So I think that's really interesting idea, is that the some of the bliss comes from having a couple of different exit strategies, comes from having a solid plan B.
Exactly. B and C.
There's a level of preparation to bliss, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So one last question for you, because you're the blissful investor, how do you recharge as a real estate investor, and how do you renew your excitement? Obviously you're excited about this project, but how do you build that bliss muscle?
Yeah. So bliss is a practice. Thank you for calling it a bliss muscle. So, so I actually have a lot of strategies. I wrote a book called Choose Bliss. You can find it on Amazon, and it gives you all the strategies that I use in my personal life and many of my clients have used. I used to be an executive coach. So these are the proven strategies that I use to keep my bliss muscle exercised and working, right? In real estate, I will say, I was not into real estate. You heard my story. I was not into real estate. I was just doing it as my side thingy that I kind of ignored. I set it up so I didn't have to pay attention to it. And then every once in a while, I'll start having a conversation. Like I start hanging out with people that enjoy real estate, right? So you have to be a little proactive about this, because most people are afraid of real estate, and they will make you feel worse about it. But if you hang out with people at meetups or online on Facebook or whatever that are excited about it, now you're having conversations that are interesting and exciting, and you kind of see opportunities. Then for me, that really raises my energy. So hanging out with my realtor when we go on shopping days, like we've got both of us have birthdays next week. Our birthday lunch is to go look at model homes. So like I'm hanging out with people that love doing this with me. And that really keeps my excitement up.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time. Reminder to listeners, you can learn more at blissfulinvestor.com. You can always email us at media@millionacres.com to share your thoughts. And we have a new voice line at 844-615-2201. And you can leave us a message to be part of the show. Stay well and stay invested.
Thank you for tuning in to the Millionacres Podcast. I hope you liked today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing through your favorite podcast provider. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop us a line at help@millionacres.com. Stay well and stay invested. People on this program may have an interest in the deals, offerings, or services they discuss that Millionacres or the Motley Fool may have a formal recommendation for or against. Always consult a certified tax professional before acting on tax advice, and do not buy or sell assets based solely on what you hear.